Ben walked through the birch forest with Avery and her kids in tow. They foraged good berries from bushes as they passed by, as well as gathered other useful herbs that Avery helped point out. Thankfully, they didn't encounter any ghouls as they walked, as Ben had lost his only spear. Nearing the edge of the forest, Ben ran a hand over his brow and fidgeted with his ear. He froze. Whenever he did that, it always meant some primal instinct knew something was amiss. And that instinct had never been wrong. He tilted his head and twitched an ear. The sounds of groaning and fighting echoed far off in the woods from the direction of Ernest's cabin. Ben shoved the overflowing basket to Avery and rushed forward. "Keep a distance," he called back to her. "Hide here until I know it's safe." In a few moments, the trees thinned, and Ben could make out the signs of a struggle in Ernest's yard. He pushed himself to run faster. Blick, Umpty, and Ernest fought with a small group of ghouls. Ernest stood on the front porch, crossbow in hand. Bolts flew out rapidly to strike any monster that drew close. Blick jabbed at their rotting flesh with one of his spears, and Umpty swung his sword with lethal intent. Marge and Red were nowhere in sight. Ben hoped they were both safe inside. "Hey, Wolf Boy's back," Blick called out. A fierce grin split his beard as he smacked another ghoul to the ground. "What the hell did you do out there?" Umpty shouted, slashing a ghoul's throat with his sword. "That howling must have attracted all the ghouls in the area." Ben thought back to the fight with his ghoul father. Family matters. Ben rushed forward to join the fray. Extra spears leaned against the wall by the front door. He snatched one up and immediately spun around, walloping a ghoul across its chest. "How have you been holding up?" "Terribly," Ernest cried, lifting his crossbow to fire. "One got inside, but Marge took care of it." Ben winced at this news as he thrust his spear forward again. A stream of rotting monsters staggered toward them through the trees. "How many more are going to show up?" "Don't waste time counting them. Just kill them all," Blick grunted. "And one of them must be huge. The roar shook the teeth in my head. Sounded like a bleeding bear." Ben remembered when Marge told everyone about her husband. Ben had been trying to instill hope into Marge's soul by saying that he'd most likely made it out, that he, a big strong bear, had fought off the ghouls and came through all right. But hearing this news, that one of the ghouls there sounded a lot like a bear, dread settled on his shoulders. Marge said her husband had a quarrel with Ben's father in the past and the old wolf was chased off without much trouble. After all, how could a wolf, even a big one, stand up to a bear? Ben yanked his spear from the body of the ghoul he just killed. He shuddered, as he had little faith in their ability to last long against a bear who was likely twice his size. A bellowing roar echoed from the forest. The last of the smaller ghouls fell, but they only had mere moments before the new horror would arrive. Ben turned toward where the goat family still hid. "Avery, get down here! Get in the cabin!" Avery bolted out of the underbrush and ran for the cabin, one of her kids in her arms, the rest chasing her ankles. "You found more survivors?" Umpty shouted in surprise. Ben paid him no mind as he stepped to meet Avery. "Get everyone inside! Block up the doors if you can!" The explosive noise of splintering wood and falling trees pulled everyone's attention back to the forest. A massive bear ghoul charged at them, eyes dark and framed with blood, mouth agape with bits of flesh and bone caught between sharpened teeth. A hulking figure whose mass was prominent in its torso and arms. The big ghoul charged the cabin, roaring as its steps thundered on the hard-packed ground. Ben shoved Avery into the house and dove the other way to escape the beast's lumbering charge. Blick got thrown aside by a blow from one of the bear's swinging arms. Ernest grabbed Umpty and dove to one side, narrowly evading the monster as it crashed into a tree beside the cabin. The pretty dogwood crashed to the ground. Rage filled his eyes as Ernest fired his crossbow at the bear. With no time to reload, he snatched up a spare spear and charged the bear, screaming incoherently. He lunged forward with the spear, which sank into the bear's neck, causing it to howl and flail. The wooden shaft broke as the massive ghoul turned and swiped at Ernest, catapulting him across the yard. The broken spear point stuck out from the back of its neck. Umpty rushed in and gave it a slash across the chest with his sword. A horrid smell filled the air as the blood coursed through its patchy fur. The bear took one look at the royal guardsman and turned around. It galloped away on all fours like a non-speaker. "Ernest, are you all right?" Ben rushed over to the fallen man's side. Ernest groaned as he pushed himself upright, still clutching the broken shaft of the spear. He took one long look at the tree Marge's husband knocked down and hung his head with a tired sigh. "My wife planted that tree on our wedding day," he spoke breathlessly. "It's one of the few things I had to remember her by." Blick hobbled over to join Ben and Ernest, Umpty close behind, sheathing his sword as he walked. "Are you all right, Blick?" Ben's breath shook as he leaned against the cabin wall. "I'm fine," the temperamental dwarf chuckled. "It takes more than a swat like that to fell a sturdy dwarf. A hulking bear's arm is nothing." Umpty brushed off the dirt that the fight had kicked up onto his uniform pants. He looked around at everyone, his brow tightening. "They'll be back. They know where we are now. We need to leave." "All right." Ben stood up, sliding one arm under Ernest's shoulder and easing him to his feet. "Let's regroup, gather supplies, and get moving." Ernest looked around the yard at the disgusting bodies on the floor. He dropped the now useless spear shaft. Then he fixed his gaze on Umpty. "Strange." "What is?" Umpty asked. "That the bear left as soon as he saw you attack him." Umpty paused before responding. "I probably hit a weak spot after it was already wounded. Perhaps it's smart and chose to heal up before finishing the job." He turned to retreat back into the cabin. Ernest kept an eye on him the whole way. His eyes narrowed into a thoughtful grimace. Ben looked up at the crooked man and saw the face of a man whose sense of trust had begun to falter.